On this Sunday night, heartache in the Cowessess First Nation. The poignant vigil for the hundreds of victims of a residential school.
The world is going to hear about our historical trauma.
Mounting anxiety in Florida as families wait for answers.
If she's underneath that rubble alive, it'll be a miracle.
Plus, the Canadians unaccounted for. Our Jackson Proskow is at the scene tonight. BC's sweltering heat dome and the damage to crops. Plus, confidence in Canada's team to score the Stanley Cup.
We made it this far, right? So why not? We can do it.
But one Montreal Canadian will be MIA.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the grief for victims of a residential school in Saskatchewan. The Cowessess First Nation held a vigil to honor hundreds of Indigenous children believed to be buried in unmarked graves. The mourning is accompanied by anger directed at the Catholic Church responsible for operating the school. As Heather Yourex-West explains, there is more work to be done to uncover the truth as Indigenous communities try to heal.
They came together in mourning and prayer. The people of the Cowessess First Nation hosting a gravesite vigil Saturday, open to anyone who wanted to come and honor those found in as many as 751 unmarked graves near the former site of the Marieval Residential School.
We had a lot of support from all the communities around the area here because they all have loved ones here.
The unmarked graves now identified by not only a flag but a small solar light. Not everyone found buried here went to the residential school, but some did. Finding these children at last has come as a relief to some.
Definitely grief that goes along with what's been found out, but there's also a sense of relief because we've been talking about this. Our community, our people, our elders have been talking about this for many years. It's been hidden for so long.
At 7:51, mourners marked a moment of silence before residential school survivors shared stories of a past filled with pain.
It was so important. It was important for me to be with my community, with my leadership, and take part in the process of honoring, the children that went through residential school.
It has been an emotionally difficult few days for many families here, but the work is not done yet.
The next steps is to continue on with the survey to make sure that we don't have any that we missed, and to put markings on the unmarked graves and have a name to them.
To do that, Cowessess First Nation is hoping to obtain historical documents from the Catholic Church. Across the country, Catholic and other Christian churches are facing mounting community anger over their role in the operation of residential schools. In BC, a fifth church, the St. Paul's Anglican Church on the Gitwangak First Nation, was set ablaze. This time the flames were extinguished before the building was lost.
While I understand that hostility and needing to find a way to heal from it, that church was built by our ancestors in the late 1800s by the hands of our elders at the time with such a great sense of pride.
In Edmonton, police are investigating after a statue of Pope John Paul II was vandalized with red paint. But after the discovery of 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, BC, and as many as 751 in Saskatchewan, emotions are running high.
Sunday marks the fourth day since the discovery here was announced. The day began with a traditional pipe ceremony at the site. A community feast is also planned. It's a ceremonial practice believed to help the spirits continue on to the spiritual world. Robin?
Heather Yourex-West near the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. There is some support for those who need it. The Indian Residential School Survivors Crisis Line is confidential and available 24 hours a day. The toll-free number is 1-866-925-4419. To Florida now, where the death toll has risen to 9 in that catastrophic condo collapse. Part of the 12-story tower came crashing down early Thursday morning while people were sleeping. More than 150 people remain unaccounted for, including 4 Canadians, according to Global Affairs Canada. Our Jackson Proskow is at the scene for us tonight. Jackson, what do we know about these Canadians?
Robin, the 4 Canadians were spread between 2 units. They're listed as unaccounted for right now because they were in the collapsed section of the building, and they belong to 3 different families. We do know that relatives of at least one of those families are en route here to Miami, and when they get here, they will likely arrive at the hotel behind me. That's the Family Reunification Center, where all day long we've seen families arrive. They cry in the streets, they hug each other, they try to console each other, but it is an incredible, painful experience for them being here. It is incredibly difficult for them to be here as they come to grips with what their family members and loved ones have been through. Earlier today, we actually saw several Miami Beach City buses pull up here, and they took the family members to the collapse site, giving them a chance to see that hollowed ground right now, where, of course, there are so many unanswered questions about the fate of their loved ones. I also had a chance to speak with Canada's Consul General here in the Miami area, and she tells me there are incredible challenges in providing support to these grieving families.
We're also in a situation here specifically where we're putting pieces of a puzzle together. What we're trying to find out was who was in that building, but we don't have that information. No one does. So local authorities have the information that they can piece together. We have information that we can piece together.
And as they go back and forth, of course, their priority is making sure that the families get as much information as possible. And Robin, that includes making sure they know how much support awaits them here in Miami Beach.
But Jackson, how are all the families receiving information and updates?
Inside that hotel room, they're being given regular briefings, essentially, by officials here and search and rescue officials to bring them up to date. One of the key things here, of course, is proceeding with caution and sensitivity. And they want to make sure that families are given any news, especially any grim news, before the general public is made aware, to help them cope and help them understand. And Robin, there is an incredible support network for those families here on the ground. Everything from support dogs to international relief groups with specialty in handling this kind of trauma.
Jackson Proskow in Surfside, Florida. Thanks, Jackson. Crews are working around the clock with the painstaking task of trying to recover bodies, but they have to go slowly. Jennifer Johnson explains why.
Search and rescue teams have cut a 12-meter deep trench into the rubble of the Surfside condominium building, revealing more grim news for families waiting to hear the fate of their loved ones.
We've continued all night to build that trench, and as a result of that, we were able to recover 4 additional bodies in the rubble, as well as additional human remains.
Family members are being asked to provide DNA samples so remains can be identified quickly. Many are still holding out hope, including Mike Noriega, whose father found his missing grandmother's birthday card amid the destruction.
If she's underneath that rubble alive, it'll be a miracle of the ages. And if she's not, I know that her soul is in heaven.
Search and rescuers have to move slowly. Fires deep into the debris and shifting rubble are making their efforts even more difficult.
The building moved. This is why we have this technology that gave us enough time to evacuate the site until the building settled.
Officials are now working on relocating residents of a sister condominium complex who have concerns about their own building collapsing.
We have huge amounts of money that have been pledged or that have been donated. There's going to be folks that are displaced. There's folks that's lives have been shattered as a result of this.
A 2018 engineers report found cracking and structural damage in the building's parking garage in walls, columns, and beams. Work on that was scheduled but hadn't started. Attorneys for the Condominium Association are questioning why the problems were ignored for so long.
If there is an engineer who believes that concrete pitting and falling and rebar deterioration poses a hazardous risk to the building and a risk of collapse, that needs to be clear.
That report also called for distressed concrete slabs under the pool deck to be removed and replaced, but that hadn't happened either. Chunks of the rubble are being moved to large warehouses to help investigators piece together what caused the structure to come crashing down in a matter of seconds. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
People in BC are scrambling to find relief from what Environment Canada is calling a dangerous heat wave. An unusually strong ridge of high pressure bubbled up over the province on Friday, creating a heat dome. And that dome is trapping air that is hot and oppressive. This is unusual weather for this part of Canada, and it's being made worse by the fact that 60% of BC residents don't have air conditioning at home. Right now, health officials say the risk of extreme heat exposure is higher than COVID-19. The heat wave is taking a toll on BC's economy. Abbotsford, an hour outside Vancouver, is in the Fraser Valley, and it's considered the breadbasket of farming in the province. As Global's Emad Agahi is here to tell us, farmers are worried their crops and livelihoods are being destroyed. Emad?
Well, Robin, it didn't take long for this crushing heat wave to begin impacting BC's agriculture, especially here in the Fraser Valley. At this Abbotsford raspberry farm, minute by minute, hundreds of thousands of dollars could be just evaporating into the sky, and rows of crop, as far as you can see, may now be essentially useless.
Look at these leaves. Yeah. These are already burned, these leaves.
These men, some raspberry farmers for 40 years, have never seen so much damage in such a short time.
And this is a natural disaster affecting after the COVID pandemic. So we would like to urge to the Minister of Agriculture to step in, as well as to the federal government officials to step in.
A call for government help because the excruciating sun and heat over the last 48 hours is cooking and rotting fresh raspberries.
What we're seeing with this heat wave is the raspberry crop is literally being baked. It's being baked and cooked on the vine, and it will have little value, if any, by the time this heat wave is done.
The sunburnt fruits cannot be sold, meaning hundreds, if not thousands of acres of crops are being wasted as temperatures in the area break records.
It should be changing from green to red, but it is changing from green to white, as you can see.
And what's more is that parts of Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley are also under an air quality advisory due to high concentrations of ground level ozone, which makes working on these farms even more difficult. Robin.
Emad Agahi in Abbotsford, BC. Thank you, Emad. Okay, let's bring in Global News meteorologist Yvonne Schalle. Yvonne, first of all, what is this heat dome?
The heat dome that's blanketing across both the western side of the country. Now, it's a significant ridge of high pressure that builds in place, and it traps the heat underneath. And what it allows is Mother Nature to crank up the heat and keep significant heat, record-breaking heat for several days. Now, it is blanketing both Alberta and BC, and we're going to continue to watch this as this ridge continues to build. With the heat warning, we've got temperatures highs into the 40s, with the humidex feeling into the mid-40s, and overnight lows, and that'll stretch in towards Alberta, will be dipping down just to 20 degrees.
It has been blistering in parts of BC. Very unusual for this part of Canada in June. Surely records are breaking.
Absolutely. And this is significant and unprecedented because we typically see this in July and August. And now we're breaking records in the month of June. But we also have the potential to break all-time record highs. For example, Lillooet and Lytton, this is in BC, will be exceeding 44 degrees. Last record was back in 1941. And all-time records for Alberta. Edmonton will be keeping a close eye on these numbers. Exceeding 37 degrees, an old record that was set back in 1937. Robin?
All right, Yvonne, thanks so much for that. Infrastructure Minister Catherine McKenna won't be running in the next election to focus on tackling climate change. One of her first jobs in the Liberal government in 2015 was Environment Minister. She had to stick-handle the introduction of a price on carbon emissions. McKenna has represented the riding of Ottawa Centre for 6 years. It could be a riding for former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, should he decide to run. Coming up, how did classified military papers about a British warship end up at a bus stop? Plus, the scrutiny of Australia's low vaccination rates with a fast-moving variant. It might look like game day in Toronto, but it's vaccine day. The Scotiabank Arena, home of the Maple Leafs and the Raptors, opened its doors at 7 a.m. The goal of the mass vaccination campaign is to administer shots to 25,000 people, and if successful, that would double the national record for the most people vaccinated in a single day at a single clinic. In Australia, outbreaks linked to the Delta variant have forced millions of people into lockdown. The country's biggest city, Sydney, is bracing for a surge in cases, which could force the government to extend stay-at-home orders. The Delta variant is highly contagious and has dealt a major blow to Australia's zero COVID strategy. And as Redmond Shannon reports, the concern now is the low vaccination rates down under.
Sydney's famous Bondi Beach is the epicentre of its relatively large COVID-19 outbreak. 30 new cases of the Delta variant in the state of New South Wales Sunday. More than 5 million people are under a stay-at-home order. Exercise is one of the few reasons residents are allowed outside.
I also do want to foreshadow that given how contagious this strain of the virus is, we do anticipate that in the next few days, case numbers are likely to increase even beyond what we've seen today.
That is because household contacts of the cases are expected to test positive too.
The measure of our success will be to limit the number of people who've been out and about in the community who get the disease.
In a country that's pursuing a zero COVID strategy, this outbreak is the most serious this year. Another lockdown for 48 hours is in place 3,000 kilometres away in Darwin.
This is a challenging time for the Territory and for all Territorians. As I said, it's our biggest threat yet, it's our biggest test.
The concerns about the Delta variant are particularly acute because less than 5% of the country is fully vaccinated. New Zealand has suspended its 3-month-old travel bubble with its nearest neighbour. Authorities are particularly worried about an infected Australian visitor who certainly did a lot of sightseeing.
As of yesterday, 2,444 potential contacts have been identified as a result of our investigations here in Wellington.
None of those contacts have tested positive so far, but the case highlights how difficult it can be to pursue a zero COVID strategy. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Britain's Defence Ministry is in hot water after classified documents were found at a bus stop. According to BBC News, a member of the public found 50 pages of sensitive military papers. Some relate to an incident off Crimea last week when Russian forces reacted aggressively to a British warship sailing through. The files suggest its passage was calculated to incite a response. The papers also contain potential future plans for a military presence in Afghanistan. On Twitter, the ministry says the files were reported missing last week and an investigation is underway. Still ahead, the tragedy of a Canadian soldier and his family. Did the system fail the veteran who was struggling with mental health?
You're watching Global National.
4 years after a soldier from Nova Scotia killed his family and himself, an inquiry has revealed critical gaps in the system meant to help veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. Lionel Desmond struggled with his mental health after serving in Afghanistan. As Ross Lord explains, the inquiry heard there was a lack of coordination and resources to help those who have served our country.
Lionel Desmond was known as a cheerful family man. He descended into paranoia after coming home from a tour in Afghanistan in 2007. Devastated by PTSD, Desmond shot and killed his wife, Shayna, their 10-year-old daughter, and his mother before killing himself. His case manager told the fatality inquiry investigating the tragedy she did her best.
It was not out of neglect. You know what I mean? Like, it's not...
But the inquiry heard it took Veterans Affairs Canada 6 months to appoint a case manager, even though Desmond's disorder was already obvious. A delay Marie-Paul Doucette blames on a lack of resources and budget cuts imposed by the former Conservative government.
Some days he called the office and he was in distress, and then there was not much that could be done in the moment other than spend time with him.
Other veterans with PTSD say it's bad enough they're bounced from the military medical system to the private system, where doctors can be hard to find. They say losing precious months without a case manager is inexcusable.
When you're dealing with PTSD, 6 months, you might as well say 600 years. Okay, it's a time frame that doesn't register and doesn't help. Things can go so horrible in 6 months.
A lack of sharing medical records between the military and provinces is another problem, but this veteran who wrote a book about the military bureaucracy says there are signs of improvement within Veterans Affairs.
We started hiring far more case managers, and they still need more.
Desmond's sister-in-law testified he complained about being a victim of anti-black racism before he left the Canadian Forces. The inquiry is examining Desmond's access to mental health and domestic violence services, the training of the professionals he encountered, and whether he should have been able to buy a rifle. The hearings are scheduled to end this fall. Ross Lord, Global News.
Up next, Habs fans are excited about their team getting to the Stanley Cup final, but a key player is staying behind. Tomorrow night, the Montreal Canadiens will play their first Stanley Cup final in nearly 30 years. If that's not exciting enough, it's also the first time a Canadian hockey team is this close to winning it since 2011. One player is being forced to sit out because of COVID-19, but as Mike Couture explains, Habs fans aren't worried.
The Montreal Canadiens were remarkably relaxed for a team that is about to play in the Stanley Cup finals. Bringing home hockey's holy grail just got a bit tougher.
Protocole de la Ligue nationale.
Habs general manager Marc Bergevin told reporters Yoel Armia was placed in COVID-19 protocol by the league, which doesn't mean he has the virus, but it does mean he won't be with the team for Game 1 in Tampa Bay.
Army's obviously an important player for us. It's just another little piece of adversity we'll have to deal with.
Adversity that has included pausing the season for a week when Armia and another player were in the same COVID-19 protocol, losing key players to injuries late in the season, and then losing their coach for the last round of the playoffs when he had COVID-19. That's despite the entire team and staff receiving their second doses of vaccine on June 9th. And as you'd expect, Habs fans aren't worried.
We're the last team to make the playoffs, first team to make the finals, right? Got to do it.
That unwavering faith isn't a shock in a town where hockey is considered a religion and the franchise goalie is seen as a savior.
Especially Carey Price, he wants that cup. He's focused, he wants that cup.
And if you think the pressure of trying to be the first Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup since 1993 is weighing on the players, look no further than the Habs goalie himself, whose words don't always match his tone.
Just excitement. It's been something that we've been working towards our whole lives.
The team embracing the opportunity as the entire country embraces this team. Mike Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
Go Habs, go. And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, Your Canada is the Lighthouse in Port Dover, Ontario. We would love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you next weekend. Have a great night.